In the loud, chaotic world of rock and roll, where guitar solos scream and drum sets roar, one woman changed everything. Quietly. Her name is Meg White. Known for her minimalist drumming and mysterious persona, Meg became one half of the legendary rock duo The White Stripes, alongside Jack White. Together, they shaped an entire era of music, blending simplicity, raw energy, and passion into something unforgettable. But behind the red, white, and black aesthetic, and behind the thunder of guitars and drums, there was a story of silence, strength, and the kind of artistry that doesn't need to shout to be heard. This is the story of Meg White, the silent power of rock. Meg White was born Megan Martha White on December 10, 1974, in Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan. From a young age, she was drawn to art and creativity, though few could predict she'd one day help lead a rock revolution. Her childhood was quiet. Friends described her as shy, soft-spoken, and deeply introspective. Unlike many musicians who start playing early, Meg never dreamed of becoming a drummer. In fact, it wasn't until her early 20s that she even picked up drumsticks, almost by accident. When she met a young musician named Jack Gillis in the mid-1990s, the two quickly bonded over their love of blues and classic rock. They married in 1996, and Jack took her last name, becoming Jack White. In that same year, they began experimenting with music together, forming what would become one of the most influential duos in rock history, The White Stripes. The White Stripes officially formed in 1997 in Detroit. Their concept was simple: two people, one guitar, one drum kit, and a bold, unforgettable color scheme: red, white, and black. Meg sat behind the drums, Jack handled vocals and guitar, and together they created a sound that felt raw, energetic, and alive. While many bands of the time were leaning toward polished production and complex arrangements, the White Stripes went the opposite way. Their music was stripped down, emotionally charged, and refreshingly imperfect. Meg's drumming was at the center of it all. She played with a minimalist style, basic beats, steady rhythm, no flashy solos, but her simplicity worked. She gave Jack's explosive guitar work a heartbeat. She grounded the chaos. In her own quiet way, Meg became the backbone of the White Stripes sound. The late 1990s were a turning point. The duo released their debut album, The White Stripes, in 1999, followed by Distill in 2000. Both albums captured the underground rock scene's attention, but it was their third album, White Blood Cells, 2001, that catapulted them into mainstream fame. The single Fell in Love with a Girl exploded across the radio and MTV, accompanied by a groundbreaking Lego-style animated video that became an instant classic. Audiences were fascinated not just by their music, but by their image: the red and white outfits, the raw energy, and the mysterious relationship between Jack and Meg. Were they brother and sister? Were they married? The band never gave a clear answer, playing along with the media's confusion. In truth, they had divorced in 2000, but continued performing together as the White Stripes, letting their music speak louder than any personal story. To many drummers, Meg White broke all the rules. Her technique was simple, sometimes even criticized as too basic. But that simplicity became her superpower. Meg once said, "If you can make a drum sound like a heartbeat, you're doing it right." Her rhythms had emotion, not just precision. Each beat carried weight. It was raw, human, and honest. She didn't need 1,000 fills or complicated patterns. Her steady beats gave the band a primal power that no machine could replicate. Her drumming had character, and in music, that's what lasts. Many musicians later admitted that Meg's simplicity changed how they viewed drumming. She showed that emotion matters more than perfection. As Jack White once said in an interview, Meg's style was childlike and innocent, and that's what made it powerful. It's exactly what the songs needed. By the early 2000s, the White Stripes had become international icons. Their fourth album, Elephant, 2003, turned them into rock superstars. The hit single, Seven Nation Army, became a global anthem, with its instantly recognizable bass line, actually played on a guitar. The song would go on to define an entire generation of rock fans and sports arenas alike. And behind that driving rhythm was Meg, calm, collected, and unshakable. Her drumming on Elephant was precise yet passionate, giving each song a pulse that fans could feel deep in their bones. They followed up with Get Behind Me, Satan, 2005, and Icky Thump, 2007, both critically acclaimed. Each record expanded their sound, yet Meg's presence remained the emotional core of their music. As their fame grew, Meg became increasingly private. She rarely gave interviews and often stayed out of the spotlight. While Jack was charismatic and talkative, Meg was quiet, almost enigmatic. This contrast fascinated fans and critics alike. Some interpreted her silence as shyness. Others saw it as artistic confidence, a refusal to perform offstage. Her quiet demeanor added to her mystique. In an industry obsessed with self-promotion, Meg stood apart simply by not speaking. In 2007, after years of intense touring and recording, the band abruptly canceled their tour due to Meg's reported anxiety issues. She retreated from public life, and the duo eventually disbanded in 2011. Since then, Meg White has largely stayed out of the spotlight, rarely seen, rarely heard, and never seeking attention. And yet, her influence continues to echo through modern rock music. Despite her success, Meg White's drumming has always sparked debate. Some critics dismissed her as unskilled or too simple. But many musicians, including top drummers, came to her defense. Dave Grohl of Foo Fighters once said, "Meg White's drumming is exactly what the White Stripes needed. It's the sound of human imperfection, and that's what rock and roll is all about." Meg never tried to prove herself technically. She played for the song, not for the spotlight. That humility, that restraint, made her one of the most original drummers of her generation. Her minimalism wasn't weakness, it was intentional artistry. In February 2011, the White Stripes officially announced their breakup. Their statement was simple and graceful. The reason is not due to artistic differences or lack of wanting to continue, but for a myriad of reasons, mostly to preserve what is beautiful and special about the band. After that, Jack White continued his solo career, while Meg stepped away completely. She married Jackson Smith, son of legendary punk musician Patti Smith, and lived a quiet life in Detroit for some years before separating. Since then, she has remained largely invisible to the media. No interviews, no public appearances, no social media. Meg White, the silent drummer, chose silence again, this time permanently. Despite her absence from the spotlight, Meg White's impact on music endures. Her drumming style has inspired a new generation of musicians who value feel over flash. In 2025, the White Stripes were officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, cementing their place among the greatest acts in rock history. Jack White paid tribute to Meg during the ceremony, acknowledging that none of it would have been possible without her unique rhythm and creative spirit. Songs like Seven Nation Army, Dead Leaves, and The Dirty Ground, and We're Going to Be Friends remain timeless, simple, emotional, and unforgettable. Meg's contribution to that sound is undeniable. She may not speak publicly, but every beat she ever played still echoes through speakers worldwide. Meg White's story carries a deeper message, one that goes beyond music. In a world that glorifies complexity, speed, and perfection, Meg showed that simplicity can be revolutionary. Her music reminded listeners that art isn't about showing off, it's about feeling. She proved that sometimes saying less means more. Sometimes silence speaks the loudest. And sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't need to shout. To her fans, Meg White is more than a drummer. She's a symbol of mystery, authenticity, and quiet strength. While others chased fame, she chose peace. While others sought attention, she sought meaning. Her disappearance from the public eye only deepened the respect many fans feel for her. She gave everything to her music, and when it was time to leave, she simply walked away. There's something poetic about that. The way she exited on her own terms, leaving behind a legacy that continues to grow even in her absence. You don't have to be loud to make an impact. Her quiet confidence and minimalist art changed the sound of modern rock. Art is emotion, not perfection. She didn't need flawless technique. She needed honesty, and that's what audiences felt. Silence can be power. By stepping back from fame, she reminded the world that artists don't owe their lives to the spotlight. Collaboration can create magic. The chemistry between Jack and Meg White remains one of the most iconic duos in music history. Meg White may have stopped playing drums publicly years ago, but her influence still pulses through every snare hit and kick drum in rock music today. Her beats were simple, but her impact was profound. She taught us that real art doesn't need to impress. It needs to connect. And she did that better than most. Her music still plays in stadiums, her name still sparks admiration, and her mystery still fascinates millions. Meg White didn't just keep the beat, she was the beat. And though she may have disappeared from the stage,